Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. The Minnesota Twins are looking forward to another great season in 2023, led by the return of All-Stars Carlos Correa and Brian Buxton. With the return of numerous players who were injured in 2022 and some new acquisitions, another division crown and a return to the World Series are in their sights. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Hello, viewers. It's my pleasure to be here again on Access to Democracy. Thank you to Alan Miller and Sharon. My name is Richard Logan, and we're here to talk about a gem of an institution in the Twin Cities area, the Bakken Museum on the northwest corner of Lake Bde Maka Ska. A lot of people have known that museum over a long period of time. And so we're going to talk about it and some of the new things that the Bakken is doing in recent times and upcoming in the future. I have with me my guest, Alissa Light, who is the president of the Bakken. She has an interesting resume that led her to the Bakken. And also Heather Walch, who's the board chair at the Bakken and the past interim president of the Bakken. Before we get talking about the Bakken in detail, could you say a little bit about what led each of you into doing work in a museum?
Would you like to start?
Sure, yeah. Well, so I am coming to the Bakken Museum most recently from community health. And I had been serving in the community health field for 17 years. And as I was imagining what I wanted to do next and how I might fit into continued systems change, some of the things I was thinking about built on the experiences of working with young people in healthcare and really recognizing young people are not only our future, but hold so much promise and curiosity and optimism and solutions for the complex problems that we face as a society. And when I learned more about what the Bakken Museum is doing, particularly in terms of really nurturing STEM education for young people around our state, I got really inspired and really wanted to be a part of that. And personally, as a woman and a queer woman in the healthcare field with two daughters, 9 and 11, it's personally really important to me that people feel a sense of belonging and inclusion and really are embraced to be a part of the STEM field who've been historically marginalized or left behind. And the Bakken is really deeply invested in that work. So it's an honor to be a part of it.
And this is Women's History Month.
It is.
It is.
And I know that you've done things in connection with that. Heather, how did you get connected to the Bakken, which is doing a lot of things that people wouldn't ordinarily associate with a small institution like the Bakken Museum?
Absolutely. So I'm a chemical engineer by education, so I have been attracted to science my entire life. I've been practicing chemistry for more years than I've been driving, so so it's always been part of my DNA. Where I got introduced to the Bakken Museum was when I was at H.B. Fuller. I had served on their foundation board and reviewing grants, and the Bakken was one of the organizations that requested a grant. Now, I had experience because I had young children, so I had been to the Bakken Museum before, and I said, oh, this is such a great institution. Is there more that we can do? And they said, well, actually, they're looking for a new board member, and so that was my avenue to play a bigger role. And like Alissa said, I mean, once you start to see the impact that our educational programs have and on the kids, and have them walk into the maker space and solve a problem that they want to solve, and they're learning through the whole process, but they're really driving it. They're not following a list of instructions. They're really driving it, and it's so much fun, and they laugh, and they help each other, like all those things that's gonna make our future a better place. It comes down to those processes and instilling the innovation, and the science is the facts behind it, but it's the innovation, it's the process.
So the Bakken Museum is a very different place from what a lot of us who first were introduced to it, say 20 years ago, would have experienced. I include myself in that. And it does a lot more things than you think a place that's housed in such a small building does too. And I've become personally aware of a lot of the things you're doing, and STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, but you also would put it as STEAM and include the arts along with those. And
Absolutely.
So you do an extraordinary amount of outreach with particularly elementary school kids around the metro area. You have an awful lot of summer camp kinds of activities, a lot of which involve science and technology and engineering and robots and things like that, right? But could you, well, I've got to say, before I ask about that next question, I've got to say that we became familiar with the Bakken about 15 years ago. We took our then only granddaughter, and she loved the Frankenstein Room. And basically, my first knowledge of the Bakken, after going there a few times, is kind of a quirky, eccentric little place that has, electrical gadget kinds of things, and the theremin, which is a real challenge to play. You might say a word about the theremin, but could you tell us a bit more about the maker space and other kinds of workspaces and innovation opportunity spaces you have for kids at the Bakken right now?
Go ahead, Heather.
So just to jump in and give a little bit of background, Frankenstein is just inherent to the inspiration of our founder, Earl Bakken, right? So Frankenstein really was what triggered him to connect electricity and life and to do amazing things for the world. But it comes back to the innovation and having that open mindset and to try things and to learn from them and to try again, right? So that's part of who we are, and that will always be part of our core of what inspiration that we bring. But that's also where we get to the STEAM part of it in our history, right? Because science is fantastic, but science alone is a set of facts. It's that creativity, it's that intersection with the arts and the humanities that really helps people leapfrog from science to innovation, right? And it's that intersection. So it's very much a part of who we are. We do a lot of educational programs where our educators actually dress up as the scientists, right? So we're continually trying to pull in that art and that creativity, the humanities piece, because science doesn't stand alone. It exists in society, right?
Absolutely.
You mentioned your founder, Earl Bakken. Please tell us a little bit more about Earl Bakken. You were alluding to the steps he went through in inventing a pacemaker and all the challenges in all of that. If you go to the Bakken Museum, you'll see an exhibit of generations of pacemakers, among many, many other things. But also you have kids that go there have the opportunity now to do things kind of in parallel with the kind of discovery innovation process that Earl Bakken engaged in. But tell us a little bit more about Earl Bakken and his, what he did and his company and his legacy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I can jump in and just start with a little story. So, as Heather mentioned, I mean, Frankenstein, which is an incredible immersive exhibit in the museum, and we're really pulling at all these threads, was a huge inspiration for Earl. Earl grew up in Columbia Heights, Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis. And when he was 8, he snuck into the Heights Theater to see the movie Frankenstein for the first time. An 8-year-old. I have a 9-year-old. And I know if she snuck in to see Frankenstein alone, she would leave not inspired, let's say. But that movie, the storytelling around it, the medical ethics and the complexity imbued in that story really inspired and lit a spark in Earl, along with the science of what electricity does in life. And that was really a founding root that inspired him to be a tinkerer and an innovator, and to invent the external battery-powered pacemaker, which is one of many things that he is incredibly well known for.
Right.
And then through that and his, I think, just open curiosity for the intersection of the life sciences and medical innovation, fringe innovation over time, and electricity as a through line, he just amassed this incredibly diverse set of interests, people, artifact collections, and much of that you can find at the museum, in addition to, I think, the kind of ethical roots that he imbued into Medtronic, which he co-founded.
Right.
So the wonder, try, discover, share, those kind of 4 steps of innovation harken back to, I think, Earl as a young kid and what he brought through his entire career, and what you'll find is a root in our philosophy at the museum.
So the museum really embodies the dream he had, or the way he approached his work and what he wanted to be centerpieces in his legacy. And it's interesting that you mentioned storytelling, because how do you excite people about things if you can't talk about it in a story?
That's right.
And which is what you've just done.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's, I have to share, I have, having lived near the Bakken Museum for a number of years now, and talked to a number of people who work in the kinds of spaces you're talking about, I have this dream that in terms of doing, getting the sciences and the arts together, I would love to, participate in some nature tours that are led by a botanist and an artist. And so you have both those two kinds of perceptions working at the same time, and kids getting exposed to that.
Yeah.
So, because a lot of knowledge comes from observation, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to jump in, I mean, one of the new exhibits we have at the museum that's a part of our Spark exhibit is inspired by nature, and it's a kind of immersive, changing mural really illuminating biomimicry. So there's a humpback whale's fin, and then you see the lights change, and you see wind turbine moving around, and you can start to see how the wind turbine is mimicking the humpback whale's fin. And it's the observation that we can take from nature that can inform and inspire innovations in technology and science, and sometimes vice versa, but that relationship and the observation being so important.
I'm sure you could share a lot of stories about, say, if you followed one kid for a day, going through all those kinds of, you could have some amazing, it would be exhausting, but it would be absolutely fascinating to, and do you have some favorite immersive exhibits, or do you have some favorite examples of what, kids' enthusiasm or anything like that you'd like to share?
So our static electricity party room is, as you can imagine, the museum is in an older home. It was originally
a wonderful old building.
A wonderful old building, lots of small nooks and crannies and smaller rooms. Well, one of those small rooms houses our static electricity party room, which is a Ben Franklin theme, and I just adore working with kids in that space, not just because it's static electricity and there's a spark and things like that, but you can see them processing what it means and how you get static electricity, and all of a sudden you can see how you can use that static electricity. And then of course the grand finale is always having someone's hair stand on end. But I will tell you, it's just a joyful place. Like, even if you don't understand, or you don't initially walk in and know exactly what to do, there's very simple instructions. You can talk to people, and just the light bulb goes off in kids, and you can't leave the room without laughing and giggling and doing a shock circle, and it's one of my favorite places. It's been there for a long time, and I will tell you.
And the Frankenstein exhibit's been there forever.
Forever,
Yes.
Absolutely. That does frighten some of the younger kids. So
Our
I would say
5-year-old loved it, kept going back. 5-year-old granddaughter. Yeah.
But I will tell you, last year, an ex-school teacher came through with her grandkids, and she ended up spending about 2 hours in that static party room teaching other kids how to run the experiments, what they were learning, what is an electron, right? Talking about how they're moving and you don't see them. And she just had a phenomenal experience. But you just can't, anywhere you go in the museum, you hear kids laughing in that room.
Yeah.
So how many absolutely right. Absolutely, joy is a great word, because a lot of things, if you read the backstories of kids who became scientists, or people who became scientists because of things that happened when they were kids, they found some joy in discovering things.
Yeah.
Working with others, maybe on robotics and all those sorts of things.
Key.
But you mentioned the space where the static electricity party room is. By the way, if you just highlight party room, you'll get a whole bunch of older people to come there too. But there were several different kinds of spaces in the Bakken Museum, right?
Yeah.
One of your big spaces in the old part, the old building, is the Great Hall, which is absolutely one of the most marvelous interior spaces anywhere in the metro area. The neighborhood council meets there, and I happen to belong to that. But also, you have some old small spaces, but you've got some new classrooms or new innovation rooms. How many of those new, larger classrooms type spaces? Plus, you've got ways of moving walls around so you can change the size of. So it's incredibly flexible now for the kinds of things you might do. Right?
It really opens the door to unlimited opportunities for us, right? Where we can change up what we're doing. We can change the space to meet the needs of what we're doing. Whether we're renting it out for an event, whether we have classrooms in there and are teaching and running experiments in the different spaces. So we have two very larger classrooms, and the main floor has now been put on one level. In the past, we would have a couple steps between the exhibits halls, but it's all been put on one level. And as you go through the museum, the purpose is to, around every corner, there's something to surprise you or shock you or learn.
Maybe literally shock you.
Right,
For sure.
Right. And so when you come in the museum now, you're going to come into a very white lobby area, very light, very bright, very non-assuming, right? We're not teaching you anything. Then you walk into these spaces and you start to explore and you take your own path. And it's a very modern front. And then you start going into the older, then you get to the Frankenstein and you get to the static party room and the old part of the house, right? So around every corner, there's a new experience to explore.
Yeah.
How often do kids who are in your maker space, how often do they come up with something that they've never seen before or done or experienced before or done
gosh.
before?
Every day?
Yeah,
Okay,
every
yeah.
day.
Do you have any
Every day.
examples of that sort of thing? Because we're talking education here at Root, right?
And you mentioned the makerspace earlier, and I forgot to address that specifically because that is an incredibly special place for us. We do laugh. Earl always said, if you smelled, burning skin, that's the smell of innovation because so many of our kids they in their projects in the makerspace are making circuits, right? And they're actually making the circuits and using a soldering gun and making the circuit and programming it so certain lights go on and certain lights don't go on. And I will tell you one project that really just brought a ton of smiles to me personally was this girl said, it's really hard to keep my plant watered. I'm going to figure out a way to water it, right? And she went about it the way she wanted to solve it, and she actually made a circuit that had created a cloud, and she had a container that would pump water, and when it was time to water it, she'd hit the button, and her circuit would start being like lightning in the cloud, and then it would water it, and then you'd hit the button and it would stop, right? And it's like she did that over the course of a week in a summer camp, right? And just to see the creativity and you and I,
the fun of it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you and I would do that, and we'd be like, just pour the water in, But they're like, oh, I want clouds and a rainbow, and I want it to do this, and then I don't want it to do that, and they put all those pieces together, and they're learning, but they don't really think of it as learning. They're designing something that's their own, which is priceless.
Yeah, and just quickly to jump in on that.
Yeah, please.
That was a project made during our girls only week of summer camp, and so before I even started at the Bakken, I had been hired but I hadn't started. Heather invited me to come to the big show, which is when all the kids from their week of summer camp come out with what they've created, their inventions, and they present them. And they present them by kind of telling the story of the idea they came up with, what they tried, what didn't work, what they learned along the way, and then where they landed. And with this group, what I saw, it was 20 some odd girls telling each other about what they learned from each other, how they asked for help, how they might have messed up, but then through that kind of mistake or failure or trial and error, discovered something entirely new. And it was the communal impact together.
Community.
Absolutely.
That is the magic.
Are girls more likely to do that kind of sharing than when you get boys together?
No, I think what we see is that through just the climate and culture infused in the makerspace and in the summer camps, it's happening all over. But we do really try to create environments where for people who maybe based on identity or other lived experience have experienced some kind of additional barriers to seeing themselves in STEM, we want to nurture that with a little extra community connection, and that's where that girls' summer camp comes into play.
And of course, when you mentioned community connection, the parents' enthusiasm about what the kids are doing.
It's a packed house. It's standing room only at the big show every single week.
Yes.
In a second, I'd like you to explain to everybody what Bacchanalia is. But first, as somebody whose field was child development, as an academic, I'm really impressed by what you're saying about the makerspace involving actually working with your hands, as well as working mentally with things, and not just relying entirely on technology, because I think we spend a little too much time looking at a two-dimensional screen, and
Absolutely.
He
That's
says
right.
as he but anyway.
No, but learning how comfort with those tools, confidence that you can try them. I mean, being invited to experiment with a glue gun, 3D printer, laser cutters. You are getting access to tools and the confidence and sort of core literacy to feel like you can experiment with them, which is just really exciting.
Could you say something about the outreach you do?
Yeah.
Yes.
Outside of the confines of the museum itself.
Right. Boy, well, I mean, the Bakken Museum was incredibly visionary in nurturing outreach education programs over a decade plus ago. And we're at a point now where we're reaching more people outside of the museum than we are in. So as pandemic restrictions have been lifting and shifting, we're now back up to being in 150 schools, over 46 counties, reaching upwards of 20,000 kids just through our outreach education
So you're talking
program.
about an impact across the state.
Statewide.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's just awesome for basically a small museum. How big is your staff now?
We have about 29 full and part-time staff. So we reach 40,000 people a year total. So when you think about how many staff are involved in creating that kind of impact and statewide, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
You also do some things that attract the community, that attract people, including potential donors and so on. There's this rumor about you do something wild called Backenalia. So could you say what Backenalia is? Backenalia spelled B-A-K-K-E-N-A-L-I-A for the Bakken.
That's right. You know, we have, I think we're up to 3 of them a year, and it really is, it's an adults only, you know, it's a social opportunity for the community, people in the community to get together. But honestly, we infuse it with science. We always have a number of different activities to do, but there's also always a theme, and they just grow and grow and grow. And now we are to the point where most of them do sell out weeks in advance.
Wow.
Because it's quite a wonderful experience for everybody. You know, there's food, there's drinks. And it's fun. Have you had the opportunity to go to one now?
I have, yes. I went to our late fall Backenalia called Mindbender Mansion. Yeah.
Okay.
And it invites 21 plus folks to come.
Mindbender, Backenalia.
You get to experience the museum
I'm thinking uncivilized
in a really
here, but
fun way. Yeah.
You know, it's festive and it's fun and it's social, and people are there to be with other people, and you meet different people. You get to do things you don't normally do. I think one I made some Play-Doh at, which was hilarious. It changed color.
Yeah, it's grown-ups doing science experiments in a really fun and community-connected.
There's more than one way that a thoughtful institution committed to innovation can impact their immediate community and a wider community. I would love to see. I would love to see if you had the staff bandwidth to handle it. If you could find volunteer opportunities for the 1,000 young professionals who live in the immediate neighborhood, a lot of whom are in STEM fields, or STEAM fields.
Yeah, well, and that's a great PSA that we are growing our volunteer program, and we would really love to invite more people to think about how they might get involved with the Bakken Museum in myriad ways.
If I could just read your mission statement or your about statement online, it says this: the Bakken Museum inspires a passion for innovation by exploring the potential for science, technology, and the humanities to make the world a better place. Located on the west shore of Bde Maka Ska in Minneapolis, the museum features, it's moving around on me, interactive exhibits for all ages and exceptional STEM education programs. So you can come there to make movies in the Spark exhibit, meet the mother of science fiction in Mary and Her Monster, that's the Frankenstein exhibit, and test out some of Ben Franklin's favorite experiments in the electricity party room. But you're doing a ton more. You're doing a ton more than those kinds of things now.
We hope to see everyone at the Bakken.
That's right.
And the neighborhood council in the neighborhood where the Bakken is located really very much wants to be as supportive as the neighborhood council can possibly be in all of this.
That's wonderful.
And we only have, I think, a few more seconds here, but the time certainly went by fast, and we can, I hope, find time to follow up on this, because there are so many dimensions of things you're doing. Each dimension could be a program.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.